The same kind of tyre you would have on your G-Wagon.
Oh, okay.
You know, these are the tail lights. So indicator, brake light and reverse light.
Okay.
Got the F1 brake light here, which is kind of cool. Peep in through here, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I can see your hand. Even
Yeah.
your hand. We can shake
See?
under.
Yes!
Yeah.
Oh
my god.
It's cool, huh?
Open sesame.
So it has little wings on the roof. That's kind of cool, right?
Oh my god.
Here's the deal with the top kind of winglets. Getting into a supercar is never easy. You have to seriously like duck and kind of maneuver your way in, right?
Yeah.
With this, it gives you so much height that you don't have to duck. So you
Yeah.
can get in easier. And then these ones, if you press this button here, this will actually close it and open it. So it's got about 540 horsepower, a range of 350 kilometers.
I still have no clue what this is.
No, you haven't seen it. I've only just seen it now.
Backwards?
We'll go back, yeah. Okay, ready?
Oh my god. Oh.
Look at that!
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that mad? Look
See,
at this. Look at what we're seeing.
Focused on readiness. Our ability to redeploy or deploy strategic assets to the peninsula, as you've seen us do here with fifth generation fighters recently. You've also seen us move a carrier into port there recently, and I think that sends a pretty strong signal as well. But it could be that our neighbors in the north there may be concerned about our increased focus on readiness. So yes, I do think we've been effective, and we will continue to look at this and ensure that we remain effective.
What kind of risky behaviors the U.S. and South Korea specifically seek to deter?
What kind of behaviors would we?
Behaviors do the U.S. and South Korea seek to deter?
Expect to deter?
Yes, I mean, like, what is the desired behavior that the U.S. and South Korea are trying to bring about?
Well, certainly we don't want to see anyone make a decision to employ a nuclear device. And lately, as you've seen, North Koreans have engaged in activity such as testing an intercontinental ballistic missile, a number of short-range ballistic missiles, firing artillery into the ocean, and so all of this activity is potentially destabilizing. And so, again, I think it's possible that they could continue to do that kind of thing, but certainly we are focused on making sure that they don't choose to employ a nuclear weapon or choose to attack South Korea. So.
Next question.
you've seen us focus on that in a major way. Again, I point to the major activity and to begin to engage in serious dialogue. On the issue of whether or not the Ukrainians can take the remaining territory on the west side of the Dnieper River in Kherson, I certainly believe that they have the capability to do that. Most importantly, the Ukrainians believe that they have the capability to do that. We've seen them engage in a very methodical but effective effort to take back their sovereign territory. I think you'll see them continue to press until they secure the territory on the west side of the river. So to answer your question, I do think they have the capability.
제에게 한 질문은 미국의 전술핵 재배치에 대한 질문 것으로 이해를 하는데 우리 정부의 한반도 비핵화 정책에 대해서는 변함이 없습니다. 그리고 전술핵 재배치를 고려하고 있지는 않습니다.
As for the question that was asked to me, I believe the question was regarding the redeployment of tactical nukes of the United States. To state our government's stance of denuclearization policy on the Korean Peninsula, I'd like to say that there's no change in our denuclearization policy, and that for now we are currently not thinking to redeploy tactical nukes on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next we'll go to Korea Herald, Doug Young-ji.
Yeah, Doug Young-ji from the Korea Herald. I have two questions for Secretary Austin. My first question is on the effectiveness of the U.S. extended deterrence. North Korea has so far launched more than 40 missiles of different types since late September, and North Korea has threatened to strike targeting South Korean territory with tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. Clearly, North Korea has continued saber-rattling and provocations. But do you still think that the current extended deterrence arrangement has been effective in deterring North Korea, and what kind of North Korean behavior do the U.S. and South Korea seek to deter? And my second question is on the Inter-Korean military agreement. North Korea has repeatedly violated the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement. It has fired around 1,000 artillery shells through the Inter-Korean maritime buffer zone. Do you think the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement is still effective in reducing tensions between the two Korea? Do you still support the Inter-Korean Military Tension Reduction Agreement, or should we abandon the deal?
On the second question, I certainly yes, I do think it's effective, and it certainly would invite comment from my colleague here, Minister Lee, as well. In terms of the effectiveness of our deterrence, yes, I do think we've been effective. I would point out to you that we have recently
The South Korean military says North Korea has fired at least 10 missiles, one ballistic weapon flying across their maritime border for the first time. Air raid sirens sounded on a remote island controlled by Seoul off the peninsula's eastern coast. The latest launch came as Pyongyang called for an end to current South Korean and US Air Force drills. Speaking at a news conference, the Japanese Defence Minister condemned the launch.
These actions by North Korea threaten the peace and stability of Japan, the region, as well as the international community, and are utterly unacceptable. They violate United Nations Security Council resolution. We strongly condemn North Korea and have made a solemn protest against these actions via diplomatic channels in Beijing.
Live to Seoul now then to speak to our correspondent Jean McKenzie. Jean, what is the latest?
Well, it's really this one missile out of the 10 that we're focusing on. It's this missile that was fired towards South Korean waters that landed in international waters, but off the South Korean coast, less than 40 miles, 60 kilometres from the South Korean coast, in between it and a small remote island off the east coast. And this is the first time that the North Koreans have ever fired a missile in this direction. Normally they fire them more out to sea. So it is an unprecedented move, and it is certainly being seen as more serious than some of the other launches that we've seen recently, more of a direct threat to South Korea. I mean, the fact that you had residents on this small island this morning receiving these air raid warnings and having to seek shelter shows that it sort of more directly affected the South Korea territory.
And tell us why this has happened, do we think, today?
Well, North Korea has blamed South Korea and the United States for a series of military exercises that they have been holding. Now, these military exercises have been going on for the last 3 months. The South Korea and the United States say they're holding these military exercises because what they see as an increased threat posed by North Korea. They see that these exercises are routine and that they're defensive. But Kim Jong-un doesn't see them this way. He thinks that they're incredibly provocative. He sees them as proof that his enemies are preparing to invade and therefore responds. There is also timing here as well, which, many here saying that this is insensitive timing because, of course, South Korea is still in a period of national mourning at the moment following this weekend, that terrible crowd crush that we saw that killed 150 young people here in Seoul.
And reaction from South Korea to this, has there been any yet?
Yes, South Korea this morning is angry. The military have called this launch intolerable. South Korea's president has gone even further and called it a territorial invasion, although, of course, the missile did land in international waters, not South Korean waters. So really this is a sort of strong rhetoric from a president who has promised to take a hard line on North Korea. But the North Koreans, have said in recent days, they issued a warning to South Korea saying that South Korea would pay the most horrible price in history if these military exercises continued. Now, that is being seen as a veiled threat, that it would use nuclear weapons against South Korea. And we know that North Korea has been preparing and is almost ready to test another nuclear weapon. This would be the first time that it's done this in 5 years. We know the preparations for that test are complete. We just think that North Korea is waiting for the right moment to do this.
Now, the Ukraine-Russia war is strengthening the anti-West bloc. Russia, China, Iran, now North Korea has joined the tide as well. Washington claims that Pyongyang is supplying Moscow with artillery shells. The operation seems to be a covert one. North Korea is making it look like the consignments are going to West Asia or North Africa, but in reality, a huge number of artillery shells are landing up in Russia's arsenal. The country's military is using them against Ukraine. WION is not in a position to verify these claims at the moment. The United States is looking towards the UN to hold North Korea accountable for the same. The national security is going to choose the same strategy it used for Iran. Like in September, Washington imposed sanctions on an Iranian company for sending Iranian drones to Russia. Similar sanctions could follow in North Korea as well. Companies and people involved in the shipment could also be targeted.
Just as we're using every tool and will use every tool to counter what the Iranian provision of weapons to Russia, we will do the same when it comes to the DPRK's provisions of weapons to Russia. There are existing sanctions on the books. We will look at additional tools and authorities that we may be able to call upon to counter this activity.
Now, these sanctions will be on top of the crippling restrictions already imposed on Pyongyang. If at all they have any impact on the country is unclear, because being a hermit kingdom, not much is known about what happens inside North Korea. Just last month, Kim Jong-un had said that he had never supplied weapons or ammunition to Russia. He further said that there are no plans to reverse the policy. In a crass statement, Pyongyang warned that the United States should keep its mouth shut and stop circulating rumors aimed at tarnishing the country's image. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani gets us the latest from New York. Listen in.
U.S. intelligence officials initially revealed back in September that Russia had reached out to North Korea to supply it with artillery shells, and North Korea had publicly denied that it would fill in that order. However, on Wednesday, John Kirby revealed that the U.S. had indeed intelligence that North Korea was supplying Moscow with artillery shells in its war against Ukraine, another sign that another U.S. adversary is indeed aiding and abetting Russia. However, it's not clear how the United States has that intelligence, where that evidence has come from, how many shells North Korea has allegedly provided to Russia, and how Russia plans on paying for it. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson said, quote, "We urge everyone to keep calm." That was on Wednesday when Russia called for calm after North Korea fired at least 23 missiles, including one that landed close to South Korea's waters. The Kremlin spokesperson also said that all parties to this conflict should avoid taking any steps that could provoke a further increase in tensions. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION, World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.
Russia continues to bombard Ukraine's infrastructure with shelling. Of course, the White House is accusing North Korea of sending a serious level of artillery shells to Russia under the guise of those shipments going to the Middle East and to North Africa. Well, that revelation coming as North Korea continues to step up its aggression in their own region. Today, they launched at this point, 4 more missiles, including an intercontinental ballistic missile, which fell into the Sea of Japan and also triggered alerts there in Japan. On Wednesday, North Korea fired off 23 missiles. That was the most ever in a single day. They say the launches are in response to the large-scale joint military drills being held by the U.S. and South Korea this week.
In response, the U.S. and South Korea have decided to extend those military drills indefinitely.
Joining us now from our nation's capital to get some more insight on North Korea's actions and the impact on the war in Ukraine is John Kirby, the coordinator for strategic communications for the National Security Council and a 28-year veteran of the U.S. Navy. Mr. Kirby, thanks so much for giving us some time. We appreciate it. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
On these two North Korea headlines, I just wonder which one you feel is more urgent in terms of what you want the public to know. The fact that they are supplying, or U.S. believes they're supplying through interesting means, weapons to Russia, or these ongoing missile launches. What's your read on both? What is North Korea up to right now?
I mean, I think just looking at both those stories, it's very plain to see that Pyongyang intends to continue to try to destabilize the region and now perhaps even the international environment, certainly over in Europe. And that's deeply concerning to us. Their willingness to continue to support Russia as they continue to kill innocent Ukrainian people, and of course their willingness to continue to destabilize the peninsula and the region with these missile launches and all these other provocative actions. That's why we're going to work with our partners at the UN and certainly across Europe inside NATO. And that's also why we're going to make sure that our military is ready to support our alliance commitments in the region, both to Japan and to South Korea.
So speaking of that, speaking more about these covert shipments, the reports of the covert shipments from North Korea to Russia, can you tell us more how the U.S. or other countries can try and stop that, or if anything's being done?
Well, we are working with allies and partners to see what our options are here, most specifically through the UN. I don't have any specific remedies to talk to today, but we are working closely with allies and partners, again, largely through the UN to see what some of our options might be. These shipments, and again, we haven't seen indications that they've been received, just that they are being covertly supplied. But this is just another example of a couple of things. How more isolated countries like North Korea and Iran, who is also providing drones to Russia, are from the international community. And it's also a sign of just how desperate Mr. Putin is. I mean, his defense industrial base cannot keep up with the expenditure of weapons and ammunition in Ukraine, and so he is reaching out now to other countries to try to get support.
And that is such a critical point, because that does underscore the narrative of the last several months, that what we've learned is that the Russian military is not quite as mighty as people once thought. And if you're turning to rogue countries now for your covert supply of weapons, that is very telling. So thank you for making that point. But of course, when it comes to Russia and weapons, there's been a lot of talk, as you well know, and a lot of concern about nuclear weapons. There was a reporting earlier this week that there were legitimate discussions amongst Russian generals about using nukes, but then Russia seemed to soften its language in a statement just yesterday, saying a nuclear war cannot be won and should not be fought. Mixed signals here. What do you think is really going on? Which should we believe?
Well, this is one thing that we can absolutely agree with the Russians on in terms of the futility of nuclear war. So we agree with that statement, and we hope that they're taking that to heart, and it's not just some talking point they're throwing out there. But again, it's irresponsible and reckless for Mr. Putin, who has been almost since the beginning of this war talking about the potential use of weapons of mass destruction in Ukraine and nuclear weapons specifically. We have to take that seriously. It would be irresponsible for us not to. So we're watching this as best we can. I won't speak to the particulars of the reporting in the New York Times on this, but we're watching this as best we can. What I can tell you is that as of today, we still see no signs that the Russian military is making preparations for the use of these kinds of weapons. And again, if they really believe what they said, then that's a good thing, and we hope they hold to that.
So as we were discussing, North Korea fired 23 ballistic missiles yesterday. You said yet today we're up to 4. In one case, landing the closest to South Korean waters since the countries were divided in 1945. Just kind of what is the thought behind all this? Is Kim Jong-un showing off, or is the country's aggression leading up to a major conflict? And that being said, South Korea responding by launching their own missiles in the same border area. Was that a wise move in turn?
Well, I think, look, for one thing, you ask what Mr. Kim's doing. It's hard to get inside his brain and know exactly what his intentions are. Clearly, he continues to try to advance his ballistic missile program. So whether these are shows of force or whether he's trying to send some sort of message to the world, I'll let him speak to that. But what we know is every time he does one of these launches, or several launches, whether they're successful or they fail, he learns. And his program grows and develops. And that's not good for anybody on the peninsula. It's certainly not good for anybody in the region, which is why, again, we're going to work with international partners to see what additional accountability measures we can put in place. And it's why we're going to make sure that we have the appropriate military readiness on the peninsula to defend our South Korean allies as well as our Japanese allies. We're doing exercises with the Japanese as well, and we're working on trilateral cooperation. But all of these launches are destabilizing and potentially dangerous. And certainly the South Koreans have a right, a natural right, and a responsibility to be able to defend themselves. And so as they conduct launches, they are trying to make sure that they have appropriate defensive capabilities in place to defend the South Korean people. But they ought to know, and we've made it very clear to them, that this is a linchpin treaty alliance that we have in the region. We take that seriously. We're going to make sure that our troops are, as they say, ready to fight tonight if it comes to that.
Mr. Kirby, I'm going to change the tone just a little bit to get back to a domestic issue before we let you go. You've devoted much of your life to public service as national security, as your involvement in national security issues, and your role in this administration. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or concerns or warnings about next week and what's swirling in our country related to the midterms and security threats, threats of violence, the attack on Speaker Pelosi's husband. I'm just wondering what your takeaway is or what your concerns are now that we're just days away from what many expect to not only be a contested but potentially violent and litigious election season.
Well, again, our thoughts and prayers go out to the Pelosi family. Obviously, this was just a horrifying attack and so senseless, and sadly appears to speak to the hyper-polarization in American society today. But I can tell you, and President Biden has been very dedicated to making sure that election security is foremost and topmost in our minds and in the minds of local and state officials all around the country. And we're confident that Americans will be able to show up and cast their votes safely and securely, and in the comfort and the knowledge that this election will be free and fair, whatever the result might be. I mean, this is part of a democracy. This is part of citizenship. And it's something that I know the men and women in the military take very seriously. That's part of what they do, is to defend the rights of American citizens to participate in the electoral process and in our democracy. We're comfortable and confident that this election will be secure.
All right, John Kirby, thank you so much for your time and insights, sir. We always appreciate it. Please come back.
You bet.
Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, closing arguments. Democrats and Republicans make their final pitch to voters as Americans prepare to cast their ballots in the midterms. Then, ceasefire. The Ethiopian government and Tigrayan rebels agree to a truce after 2 years of civil war. But widespread poverty and devastation remain. And taking the time. A bipartisan bill in Congress would eliminate clocked resets. We look at the history of daylight saving and its effect on our health.
If we have to choose where to get our light, where's the most healthy part of the day to get our light, it's actually in the mornings.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
It was like an aha moment. This is what I love doing. Early stage companies have this energy that energizes me. These are people who are trying to change the world. When I volunteer with women entrepreneurs, it's the same thing. I'm helping people reach their dreams. I'm thriving by helping others every day. People who know BDO.
the Kendeda Fund, committed to advancing restorative justice and meaningful work through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. More at KendedaFund.org. Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and the advancement of international peace and security at Carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
President Biden and former President Trump are on the road tonight with 5 days to go in the midterm election campaign. The president has kicked off a 4-state swing for Democrats, starting in New Mexico and California. Mr. Trump is headlining a Republican rally in Iowa. We'll return to the campaign right after the news summary. Final results in Israel's elections confirmed that former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's victory today. Incumbent Yair Lapid conceded defeat and directed the transition to begin. Netanyahu's far-right bloc will have a solid majority in parliament. Political tensions have spiked in Pakistan after a gunman tried to kill Imran Khan, the country's one-time leader. The U.S. and others condemned the attack. Amna Nawaz has our report, and some of the images may be disturbing.
Chaos erupted after former Prime Minister Imran Khan was shot and wounded as he waved to supporters from his convoy in the eastern city of Wazirabad. Khan was 6 days into a protest march from Lahore to Islamabad demanding early elections. Local police say Khan was shot in the leg. One of his supporters was killed, and at least 9 other people were wounded, including Khan ally and Senator Faisal Javed.
I pray for you all. Imran Khan is safe. Some friends are injured. I was told that one friend has expired. The remaining are seriously injured. We need your prayers.
Witnesses reported there may have been 2 gunmen, including one man seen firing an automatic weapon. Police later released video of one of the alleged shooters in custody, saying he acted alone and targeted Imran Khan. In a show of solidarity, Khan supporters across the country rallied into the night.
Majority of the citizens of Pakistan are with Imran Khan, and they pray for him, for his long life and prosperity.
Current Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif condemned the attack and ordered a full investigation. But Pakistan is no stranger to deadly political violence. The nation's first female prime minister, Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated in 2007 at a rally just weeks before an election. Concerns of political instability in Pakistan have only grown since Khan was ousted by parliament in April and began a series of mass rallies calling for snap elections. Prime Minister Sharif has refused, insisting elections be held as scheduled next year. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Amna Nawaz.
In Iran, at least 2 people have been killed in new protests over a
Russia.
Excelentísima señora Presidenta de la Comisión Europea. Excelentísima señora Primera Ministra de la República de Estonia.
Excellency, welcome. You too.
Excelentísima señora Primera Ministra de Nueva Zelanda.
Excellency, welcome. Great to see you. Come from a long way. Right on the other side. Pleasure. It's such a crucial moment for all of us. Thank you.
Excelentísima señora Primera Ministra del Reino de Dinamarca.
Excellency, welcome. Lovely to see you too.
Doctora Jill Biden.
You know your way around, right? The president must be good if you can live here.
Nice to see you. Very nice
Good to meet you. It's an honor to be here. Good to see you again.
I know. I said, she had a white suit over there. I said, oh no, are you wearing that tonight?
That's true. Anyway, Mr. President, would you be so kind to come here and right here? You only have to stand for 2 more hours or so. God,
ebook and study along with this.
おー、安い。買います、買います。じゃん。1. On reading. 1. 1月 meaning January. kun reading. 人。一人。one person. 誰か Then. To drink. On reading. In. As in 飲酒 meaning drinking alcohol. ビールも一杯お願いします。kun reading の飲む to drink 飲んだ then right on reading 右折 turn right turn right kun reading 右手 right hand 右手左手右手 turn rain on reading 雨天 rainy weather
Trying to learn kanji? Click the link in the description to get a free ebook and study along with this lesson.
Hi everyone! New series is here! Welcome to Kanji Time! Kanji Time! Kanji Time! Today we are going to review 5 and 5 kanji. Jan! Peace, cheap, safety. On reading. An as in 安心 meaning relief. ああ、安心だ。kun reading 安 as in 安い meaning cheap. これいくらですか ?10 円おー、安い。買います、買います。Done. 1. On reading 1月 meaning January. kun reading 人一人 one person. 誰か Then. To drink. On reading. In. As in 飲酒 meaning drinking alcohol. ビールも一杯お願いします。kun reading の飲む to drink ああ飲んだ then kun reading の飲む to drink ああ飲んだ then right on reading 右折 turn right turn right
Judiciary Committee will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on lessons from the Mueller Report Part 2, Bipartisan Perspectives. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. Last week, we heard from two former United States attorneys who exhaustively described President Trump's repeated efforts to undermine Special Counsel Mueller's investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 elections. We also heard from President Nixon's former White House counsel, who told us that the actions by this administration were substantially similar to the measures the Nixon administration took to undermine the Watergate investigation. But there is one important difference. Special Counsel Mueller was investigating a different kind of break-in. The target, a political campaign, was similar to that in Watergate, but the burglar was a hostile foreign nation. The crime was carried out through a hacking operation that stole hundreds of thousands of documents rather than the contents of a single safe. And the hacked documents were used extensively to affect the outcome of the election. Today's hearing will focus on Special Counsel Mueller's investigation of what Russia did to our democracy in 2016, and then what Russia is still trying to do to our democracy today. This is the second in a series of hearings designed to unpack the findings of Special Counsel Mueller's report so that we can discuss its implications, craft legislation, and make other recommendations to the House as necessary. We have called this a hearing for bipartisan perspectives, not only to reflect the makeup of our witness panel, but because there should be broad consensus across the political spectrum that we cannot allow foreign nations to interfere in our democratic self-government. There should also be broad consensus that if a political candidate accepts help from a foreign nation and even welcomes this attack on our democracy, that candidate has fundamentally betrayed the very institutions that he or she must swear an oath to protect. To be clear, the question before us is not merely whether campaign officials commit a crime when they take a meeting with foreign officials to discuss, quote, dirt on an opponent, or whether federal law prohibits a candidate from publicly encouraging hacking operations from a foreign adversary. The question before us comes down to what we, as American citizens, are willing to accept from our leaders. Nearly 2 years ago, FBI Director Christopher Wray announced that the FBI was setting up a foreign influence task force designed to combat, quote, foreign influence operations, close quote, including, quote, covert actions by foreign governments to influence U.S. political sentiment, close quote. The FBI explained that the goal of these influence operations is to spread disinformation, sow discord, and ultimately undermine confidence in our democratic institutions and values. I cannot imagine that a single member of this committee would disagree that these operations are poisonous to our democracy and must be disrupted and dismantled to the fullest extent of the law. In fact, at our hearing last week, I was struck by a common theme in the remarks of some of our Republican colleagues. They acknowledged we were attacked by a foreign adversary. They acknowledged that our election systems are not secure. And they acknowledged that Congress must respond to these threats without delay. But then they urged us to stop talking about the findings in the Mueller report. Unfortunately, we cannot simply forget that the president's 2016 election campaign encouraged Russia's actions both privately and publicly. Our nation's intelligence officials have made clear that Russia may do the very same things in the next election, or perhaps worse. Other hostile adversaries may try as well. Last week, to the alarm of Americans across the political spectrum, and likely to the alarm of the men and women in the law enforcement and intelligence communities who are working to prevent these attacks, President Trump stated in an interview that he would be willing to accept information about a political opponent from a foreign adversary such as Russia or China. First, when asked whether political candidates who are approached by foreign governments with this kind of information should call the FBI, President Trump responded, quote, "You don't call the FBI. Give me a break," close quote. When informed that, quote, the FBI director says that's what should happen, close quote, he responded, the FBI director is wrong. The next question was not confusing. President Trump was asked what his campaign would do if a foreign adversary like Russia or China, quote, offers you information on an opponent. He was asked, quote, should they accept it or should they call the FBI? The president responded that maybe you do both, and went on to state, I think I'd want to hear it, and they have information, I think I'd take it. In fact, this time around, the situation is even more alarming. President Trump was a private citizen during the 2016 campaign. He now sits at the head of all of our nation's intelligence and law enforcement agencies. He is provided with our nation's most sensitive secrets on a daily basis. He has sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But even with the benefit of all that guidance, and even with all of the authority and responsibility he has been granted, the President has said he is open to receiving information from a foreign adversary. In fact, by stating publicly that he would accept help from a foreign government, he may well have encouraged more foreign influence operations against our democracy. We heard some relevant testimony about this in the Hicks interview yesterday, and we will be releasing that transcript soon. The President's willingness to again welcome prohibited foreign assistance, now with a full understanding that the law prohibits it, is indeed shocking. The President may be willing to discard the lessons of the Mueller report, but we are not. With the 2020 election looming, we must act immediately to respond to the ongoing foreign threats we face, as well as to the President's apparent willingness to accept them. I look forward to today's critical discussion and to learning every lesson we can so that this very recent sorry history does not repeat itself. It is now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the title of the hearing, as you have stated, is Lessons from Mueller Report Part 2, Bipartisan Perspectives. I think we will have our chance to hear this today, but I do have a concern that I want to bring up. The beginning of this, and this is a procedural issue, the chairman has every right to have every hearing. I'm glad that he actually has listened to us, that the affirmative finding out of the Mueller report was foreign interference, and we would like to talk about that. But yet, when our side was asked, or we were asked, what are the hearing schedule for this week, we were told we're going to get another rerun of obstruction. In fact, that was as late as of Monday night at 9 o'clock. We were told that this was going to be all about last week again in obstruction, which, you know, look, it's last week again, an obstruction, which, you know, look, it's up to the chairman to do whatever, you know, he wants to do, and we respect that, but to actually have, you know, a good repartee so that we can get appropriate witnesses and work with that. Our witness is going to be, we are very happy to have him here, but it is something that we were caught unawares about, and I think it is something that if we can go forward, at least a knowledgeable heads up would affect all, because I think foreign interference in election systems are things that we need to discuss, and we've talked about that with bills that are out there, but it should come up in a hearing in which we actually have asked for, and you're not going to allow us to forget the rest of it, so don't worry about that, I'm sure. As we go forward today, though, the special counsel finished his investigation, found no Americans, no one on the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russians. That was great news for America, and I thought it would be actually great news to all Americans. To my surprise, and really not really surprised, it wasn't. Democrats are not only disappointed, they're angry. Angry the president was not a Russian asset, it seems. Imagine disliking a president so much that you wished he were a foreign agent. That's where the other party is today. Despite the Mueller report's conclusions that came to, Democrats have spent the past few months trying to desperately revive their Russian conspiracy theory. Democrats spent 2 years calling the Mueller team the best of the best. But since they didn't like the outcome, Democrats now have to play prosecutor and redo the Mueller investigation. They launched their Mueller do-over when the chairman sent documents requests to 81 individuals and entities connected to the president. We'll call that the 81 investigation, as I call it. It was quickly abandoned in favor of Plan B. Plan B was Democrats manufactured a fight with the Attorney General. They issued a subpoena directing the Attorney General to violate the law by producing grand jury materials to Congress. Unsurprisingly, the Attorney General declined to break the law. Rather than engage in traditional accommodation process, the chairman held the Attorney General in contempt in record time on flimsy grounds. Even their own witnesses admitted the subpoena was asking for illegal things. Did the chairman learn from the strength? No. The Democrats overplayed their hand again with Plan C when they subpoenaed testimony and documents from former White House counsel Don McGahn. The Democrats subpoenaed McGahn knowing every president since at least the 1970s, including Presidents Clinton and Obama, claimed immunity over congressional testimony from close presidential advisors. The Trump administration, like Clinton and Obama, claimed immunity over McGahn's testimony, and McGahn did not appear. When plans A through C failed to accomplish anything of substance, we decided to go in for the heavy artillery for Plan D. What was Plan D? Was it Mueller himself? No. That would have made too much sense. Was it the pivot? It was a pivot to focus on the actual findings of wrongdoing in the Mueller report related to foreign election influence? No, that would have been productive. How do we focus on real issues facing America with the border crisis? We don't do. No, that would have been too compassionate. Instead, Plan D was John Dean. Yes, the convicted felon from Watergate scandal who spent 40 years telling everyone who will pay him that anything to walks is worse, that anything he did was, and anything that happens now is worse than Watergate. The Columbia Journalism Review ran the headline, Democrats' John Dean hearing is a flop. Washington Post columnist Karen Tumult said, no friend of the Trump administration, by the way, said, perhaps the best thing that could be said about the hearing was that no one repeated a stunt quite like the one that we saw from Representative Cohenpool last month in that same room when he ate from a bucket of chicken. The fact that Democrats believe the American public would be energized by John Dean, who has done nothing relevant since the 70s, shows how desperate and out of touch they became. And that desperation actually showed last week when, after the Dean hearing bombed and at least one member of the committee scolded MSNBC for ignoring the Dean hearing, not showing it enough. I hope the John Dean hearing was an end to the circus. But because no matter how many times we relive the findings of the report, the conclusions will not magically change. Instead, we're ignoring more pressing issues, but as I said last week, our actions expose our real priorities. So what hearing did we include for this week? Mueller Report Part 2, Bipartisan Perspectives. Well, we know that we're here to discuss. Given the majority's action in preparing for this hearing and the notice that we were given, I fear that once again we were turning this committee into another circus. The Attorney General made the Mueller report public 2 months ago. We can all read it for ourselves. We've had some wonderful dramatic readings in here over the past week or two, and even yesterday in the Hicks interview, and we all know what it says. The lesson of the Mueller report is no conspiracy. Well, as everyone in my generation growing up, they realized that the summer season was summer season was after all the shows had run the whole season. It was time for reruns. Well, tomorrow is the official start of summer. It's time for rerun season. Yesterday's episode was Hope Hicks. Today's episode is before us. So with that, Mr. Chairman, without further ado, let the show begin.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I will now introduce today's witnesses. Carrie Cordero is the Robert Gates Senior Fellow and General Counsel at the Center for New American Security and an adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University. She is also the co-founder of Checks and Balances, an organization of conservative and libertarian lawyers dedicated to core constitutional principles and the rule of law. Ms. Cordero received her bachelor's degree from Columbia University and her JD from American University.
会場正面方向をご覧ください。Please look at your phone. まずは着陸と天皇させらをご挨拶。デルタガーティーローバーズです。デルタガーティーローバー。それではここで本日展示飛行を行うパイロットを紹介します。Let's introduce today's pilot. 1番機フライトリーダー3等空佐春山コレヒコ。航空学生47期鹿児島県出身。Blue Impact 1 フライトリーメジャーコレヒコ春山。2番機レフトウィング1等空尉吉田翔。明治大学東京都出身。Blue Impact 2レフトウィングキャプテン翔吉田。3番機ライトウィング2等空尉上原宏。
経験を踏まえながら医療提供体制を充実。
has become a very good friend of mine. Jamil, thank you. Thank you. Also with us are Susan Oliver and Jessica Davis. Their husbands, Deputy Sheriff Danny Oliver and Detective Michael Davis, were slain in the line of duty in California. They were pillars of their community. These brave men were viciously gunned down by an illegal immigrant with a criminal record, and 2 prior deportations, should have never been in our country. Sitting with Susan is her daughter, Jenna. Jenna, I want you to know that your father was a hero and that tonight
ロイター通信によりますと、ドイツで会談を
Today, I'm taking England's most luxurious train, the iconic British Pullman. Let's lift the veil on this exclusive train, reserved for the lucky few. All as we glide through the beautiful English countryside. We'll settle into the best seats on board, a private first-class compartment, complete with free-flowing champagne, 5-course Michelin-starred dining, and all whilst being pulled along by the Queen's royal locomotive. Step back into the roaring 20s as we explore the various classes along this 11-car private train, with each carriage as unique and opulent as the last. To start this epic adventure, let's head to London's historic Victoria Station on a rare sunny British summer's morning.
Hello there and welcome back to the channel. You join me today at London Victoria Station, where we're off on another luxury train. So without any more to say, let's go and find out where we're going to catch this exotic train from. I believe it's platform 2. I believe we've found it. Got to follow the music, right?
Of course there's a welcome party. This is no ordinary train. Belmont offer a private lounge adjacent to platform 2. There's space to kick back in and sip some champagne, all whilst you wait in anticipation for your opulent journey to begin. Today, however, we don't have to wait long, and after having our tickets checked, we're through onto the platform. Here we're met with the Class 67, the Queen's Messenger. This is one of 2 locomotives which pull the Royal Train.
I've been informed that we're in coach Xena today. I have actually got a little bit of research to do behind each of the carriages that we're going to be trying out today.
So as alluded to, there's a lot to see on this train. Each of the 11 carriages are unique and boast a diverse history, from carrying the Queen to being part of Churchill's funeral train. Now that's an
Unprecedented describes most things about the Donald Trump administration. One unique element, the presence of the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, and her relationship to First Lady Melania Trump. Glamorous stepmother and stepdaughter since 2005, but it was 2016 during the Trump presidential campaign.
My father, Donald J. Trump.
When the dynamic between the 2 women shifted to politics. Most times on the campaign trail,
Hello, Iowa.
Melania Trump not interested in doing traditional spousal appearances. So it was Ivanka Trump, as surrogate, who stepped into the role.
I just want to thank you, honey, because great job.
Staying on as the female face of the administration and the family after Trump became president.
This is the first U.S. government, all of government, approach to empowering women in the developing world.
Taking on as senior advisor some of the more traditional First Lady issues involving women, child care credit, and female entrepreneurship.
A real power named Ivanka. And she would call me and she would say, Daddy, you don't understand, you must do this, and I said, oh.
Creating an odd dynamic, switching off front seat, back seat as the 2 women in Trump's orbit. A relationship that one source with knowledge of the relationship says has created a, quote, cordial but not close dynamic, and at times friction. There are similarities that have reportedly caused static.
This is a very special place. I will never forget.
Melania Trump's first big solo trip was to Africa, and Ivanka's first big solo trip was also to Africa. Melania Trump was the first to introduce highly produced mini videos of her events for public consumption. Ivanka now makes her own short films with voiceovers and music. On trips with Trump, when Melania goes, Ivanka's profile diminishes. When she doesn't,
Mike, Beauty and the Beast, Mike.
Ivanka often steps forward. In a way, splitting the traditional norms, but sharing one key component.
I give him many advices, but sometimes he listens, sometimes he doesn't.
They both have the ear of the president.
I'm candid in my opinions, and I share them, solicited or otherwise.
Kate Bennett, CNN, Washington. Unprecedented describes most things about the Donald Trump administration. One unique element, the presence of the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, and her relationship to First Lady Melania Trump. Glamorous stepmother and stepdaughter since 2005, but it was 2016 during the Trump presidential campaign.
My father, Donald J. Trump.
When the dynamic between the 2 women shifted to politics. Most times on the campaign trail,
Hello, Iowa.
Melania Trump not interested in doing traditional spousal appearances. So it was Ivanka Trump, as surrogate, who stepped into the role.
I just want to thank you, honey, because great job.
Staying on as the female face of the administration and the family after Trump became president.
This is the first U.S. government, all of government, approach to empowering women in the developing world.
Taking on as senior advisor some of the more traditional First Lady issues involving women, child care credit, and female entrepreneurship.
A real power named Ivanka. And she would call me and she would say, Daddy, you don't understand, you must do this, and I said, oh.
Creating an odd dynamic, switching off front seat, back seat as the 2 women in Trump's orbit. A relationship that one source with knowledge of the relationship says has created a, quote, cordial but not close dynamic, and at times friction. There are similarities that have reportedly caused static.
This is a very special place. I will never forget.
Melania Trump's first big solo trip was to Africa, and Ivanka's first big solo trip was also to Africa. Melania Trump was the first to introduce highly produced mini videos of her events for public consumption. Ivanka now makes her own short films with voiceovers and music. On trips with Trump, when Melania goes, Ivanka's profile diminishes. When she doesn't,
Mike, beauty.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Judy Woodruff, and welcome to the Comey hearings, our PBS NewsHour special coverage of former FBI Director James Comey's testimony before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. President Donald Trump abruptly fired Comey a month ago, offering several reasons for doing so, including the president's frustrations with the FBI's investigation into possible links between Trump associates and Russian efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. Today's testimony is Comey's first time speaking publicly since he was fired. Yesterday afternoon, the Senate committee made public former Director Comey's opening statement for today's hearing, in which he outlines his meetings and conversations with President Trump leading up to the inauguration and in the weeks that followed. Joining me here in Washington in our studio for our special coverage is Robert Bauer, former White House counsel under President Barack Obama from 2009 to 2011. He is now in private legal practice. And David Rivkin, who served in both the Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush administrations. He is also now an attorney in private practice. And welcome, gentlemen, to both of you as we get ready to watch these hearings, and we're going to keep a close eye on the Senate hearing room. David Rivkin, you've served in administrations, both of you have. You know Jim Comey's reputation. What are you looking for from him this morning?
Well, I'm looking for him to obviously stay close to his prepared statement. I'm looking for him also to be, I would say, fair in how he describes his interactions, and I think he would be. There's no doubt that the president tried to impact his thinking about certain issues, including the investigation into his first national security advisor, Mr. Flynn. There's no doubt that he was also interested in being assured of his loyalty, and I think a lot of people are troubled by that. But loyalty, I think, is something that, in the context of interactions in the president and individuals who serve in this administration, not blind loyalty, not loyalty to the extent of violating legal duties or responsibilities, but to me, it's absolutely appropriate to ask Director of FBI for his loyalty in a sense of being committed to a president's agenda, no different than asking Secretary of Treasury.
And we're watching, I'm going to interrupt you, we just watched James Comey take his seat before the Senate committee, surrounded Bob Bauer by 20 or 30 photographers. What are you looking for this morning? We know what his opening statement is. What are you looking for?
Well, the question is going to be, are some of the senators going to want to push him closer to the subject of the obstruction question, closer to the nature of the probe into the Russian matter, sort of more details about that? And will the Republican senators start to run maybe some interference by questioning Comey's credibility, his practices in writing memos, and casting some doubt about whether he's given an entirely even-handed account?
And what we've seen, and we're going to continue to watch David Rivkin and Bob Bauer watch the hearing room, because we're going to go straight to the committee when they gavel to order. But David Rivkin, you know, this is now a scene that's become familiar to us. This is a committee that's been very active looking into the Russia investigation, led by Chairman Burr, the senator from North Carolina, Richard Burr, and by the vice chairman for this select committee, Mark Warner of Virginia. They're already steeped in some of the Russia questions, so this is really a piece of that investigation, isn't it?
It is, and it's quite bipartisan, a notable contrast to some of the things in the House.
All right, here we go. This is Chairman Burr gaveling to order.
Director Comey, I appreciate your willingness to appear before the committee today, and more importantly, I thank you for your dedicated service and leadership to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Your appearance today speaks to the trust we have built over the years, and I'm looking forward to a very open and candid discussion today. I'd like to remind my colleagues
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, the First Lady of the United States, and my fellow Americans. We meet tonight at a moment of unlimited potential. As we begin a new Congress, I stand here ready to work with you to achieve historic breakthroughs for all Americans. Millions of our fellow citizens are watching us now gathered in this great chamber, hoping that we will govern not as two parties, but as one nation. The agenda I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. It's the agenda of the American people. Many of us have campaigned on the same core promises: to defend American jobs and demand fair trade for American workers, to rebuild and revitalize our nation's infrastructure, to reduce the price of health care and prescription drugs, to create an immigration system that is safe, lawful, modern, and secure, and to pursue a foreign policy that puts America's interest first. There is a new opportunity in American politics if only we have the courage together to seize it. Victory is not winning for our party. Victory is winning for our country. This year, America will recognize two important anniversaries that show us the majesty of America's mission and the power of American pride. In June, we mark 75 years since the start of what General Dwight D. Eisenhower called the Great Crusade, the Allied liberation of Europe in World War II. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, 15,000 young American men jumped from the sky, and 60,000 more stormed in from the sea to save our civilization from tyranny. Here with us tonight are three of those incredible heroes: Private First Class Joseph Riley, Staff Sergeant Irving Locker, and Sergeant Herman Zaitchik. Please. gentlemen, we salute you. In 2019, we also celebrate 50 years since brave young pilots flew 250,000 miles through space to plant the American flag on the face of the moon. Half a century later, we are joined by one of the Apollo 11 astronauts who planted that flag, Buzz Aldrin. Thank you, Buzz. This year, American astronauts will go back to space on American rockets. In the 20th century, America saved freedom, transformed science, redefined the middle class, and when you get down to it, there's nothing anywhere in the world that can compete with America. Now we must step boldly and bravely into the next chapter of this great American adventure, and we must create a new standard of living for the 21st century. An amazing quality of life for all of our citizens is within reach. We can make our communities safer, our families stronger, our culture richer, our faith deeper, and our middle class bigger and more prosperous than ever before. But we must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Together, we can break decades of political stalemate. We can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, and unlock the extraordinary promise of America's future. The decision is ours to make. We must choose between greatness or gridlock, results or resistance, vision or vengeance, incredible progress or pointless destruction. Tonight, I ask you to choose greatness. Over the last 2 years, my administration has moved with urgency and historic speed to confront problems neglected by leaders of both parties over many decades. In just over 2 years since the election, we have launched an unprecedented economic boom, a boom that has rarely been seen before. There's been nothing like it. We have created 5.3 million new jobs, and importantly added 600,000 new manufacturing jobs, something which almost everyone said was impossible to do. But the fact is, we are just getting started. Wages are rising at the fastest pace in decades and growing for blue-collar workers who I promised to fight for. They're growing faster than anyone else thought possible. Nearly 5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps. The U.S. economy is growing almost twice as fast today as when I took office, and we are considered far and away the hottest economy anywhere in the world, not even close. Unemployment has reached the lowest rate in over half a century. African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American unemployment have all reached their lowest levels ever recorded. Unemployment for Americans with disabilities has also reached an all-time low. More people are working now than at any time in the history of our country. 157 million people at work. We passed a massive tax cut for working families and doubled the child tax credit. We virtually ended the estate tax, or death tax, as it is often called, on small businesses, for ranches, and also for family farms. We eliminated the very unpopular Obamacare individual mandate penalty. And to give critically ill patients access to life-saving cures, we passed, very importantly, right to try. My administration has cut more regulations in a short period of time than any other administration during its entire tenure. Companies are coming back to our country in large numbers, thanks to our historic reductions in taxes and regulations. And we have unleashed a revolution in American energy. The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بحث صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس الدولة حفظه الله وفخامة مانويل ماكرون رئيس الجمهورية الفرنسية اليوم علاقات الصداقة التاريخية الراسخة والفرص الواعدة لتطوير التعاون وتوسيع آفاقه في مختلف الجوانب، وذلك في ضوء الشراكة الاستراتيجية الشاملة التي تجمع دولة الإمارات وفرنسا، إضافة إلى مجمل التطورات والقضايا الإقليمية والدولية التي تهم البلدين. جاء ذلك خلال استقبال فخامة الرئيس الفرنسي في قصر الأليزي صاحب السمو شيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان والوفد المرافق الذي يقوم بزيارة دولة إلى الجمهورية الفرنسية، حيث عبر السمو عن سعادته بزيارته للجمهورية الفرنسية الصديقة ولقائه مجددا فخامة الرئيس إيمانويل ماكرون. كما هنأ صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان الرئيس الفرنسي باليوم الوطني لبلاده، متمنيا لفرنسا الصديقة دواما من التقدم والرخاء. ورحب الرئيس الفرنسي بزيارة السمو إلى بلاده، مؤكدا أنها تعبر عن الحرص المشترك على ترسيخ العلاقات المتميزة بين البلدين، وأعرب عن ثقته بأن الزيارة تشكل دفعا قويا للشراكة الاستراتيجية في جميع جوانبها. واستعرض صاحب السمو رئيس الدولة والرئيس مانويل ماكرون خلال اللقاء مسارات التعاون المتنوعة في إطار الشراكة الاستراتيجية بين البلدين، خاصة في المجالات الاستثمارية والاقتصادية والثقافية والعلمية والتكنولوجيا المتقدمة والطاقة المتجددة والأمن الغذائي، بجانب البيئة والتغير المناخي وغيرها من المجالات الحيوية التي تحظى باهتمام مشترك وتدعم تطلعات البلدين إلى مستقبل أفضل. وأكد الجانبان حرصهما المشترك على استمرار التشاور والتنسيق بين الجانبين تجاه العديد من القضايا والملفات ذات الأهمية المشتركة.
What's up, everybody? It's Enes here, and welcome to Istanbul, Turkey. On this week's episode, we're touring this newly constructed 263-foot long mega yacht, also known as Tatiana. On the exterior, this yacht was designed by Unique Yacht Design.